Jack Hale had never intended to alter the very fabric of reality, let alone stumble into a dimension where gravity was the primary force governing existence. But there he was, sitting cross-legged in his cramped, cluttered apartment, hands trembling with excitement as he fiddled with his new virtual reality headset. This was supposed to be another ordinary Friday night, an evening of hacking and experimenting, as usual. But what started as a harmless modification to a standard VR system quickly spiraled into something far beyond Jack's control. Come on, Jack muttered, adjusting his headset and pushing the few stray wires back into place. His apartment was nothing more than a small, dimly lit space crammed with electronics, empty pizza boxes, and too many books to ever be organized. He was an unremarkable guy, just another tech geek obsessed with the weirdest corners of the digital world. He liked tinkering with things that nobody else dared touch. It was his escape, his form of entertainment. And tonight, it was supposed to be an innocent VR experiment, simulating impossible gravitational fields and testing his theories on how the human body could adapt to altered gravitational forces. However, it all went sideways when he accidentally initiated a sequence that was never meant to run. At first, the familiar hum of the system came to life. The headset powered on, and Jack could see his own hands projected onto the digital screen in front of him. Everything seemed normal. But then, the virtual environment around him warped, twisted, and spiraled out of control. The software glitched, flickered, and started displaying odd, nonsensical code. Jack let out a nervous laugh. Great. Just great. I broke it. But as the room around him began to distort, something felt strange. The ground beneath him no longer felt like the solid floor of his apartment. It wasn't hard to explain, it was as if the laws of physics had been thrown out the window. He could feel the floor slipping away from his feet, no, not slipping, shifting. The very air around him began to hum with a strange energy, and the sensation of weightlessness crept in. He pushed the headset up from his eyes and looked around. That's when it hit him. He wasn't in his apartment anymore. Whoa, what the hell is happening? Jack muttered, now fully aware that the walls and furniture around him had disappeared. Instead, he was standing on what appeared to be a floating platform, suspended in an expanse of swirling, colored lights. The space was vast, limitless, and yet eerily beautiful, like a dream turned to reality. The gravitational pull that had felt so normal moments ago had gone completely awry, and Jack's feet barely touched the platform. He was hovering above it, and his movements felt strangely fluid, as though the very fabric of space was altering at his command. Is this a hallucination? Jack whispered. But no, it was far too vivid, too real. He tried to move forward, but his body seemed to resist, as if the air itself were pushing him back. It was like swimming through a thick, invisible liquid. He focused and concentrated, trying to will himself to the edge of the platform, and that's when he noticed the figures, beings of light, not quite human, but not completely alien either. They glided effortlessly through the air, floating like graceful dancers in the sky, their bodies pulsing with a strange, gravitational energy. They were watching him. Jack's heart raced, and the first thing that came to mind was, I need to get out of here. But no matter how hard he tried to focus on the way back to his apartment, the world around him refused to obey. It was as if the rules of his reality were no longer relevant. He could no longer make sense of up or down, left or right. Who are you? Jack asked, his voice trembling, trying to hold on to some semblance of control. He had no idea who these beings were, but they felt important. Somehow. One of the figures, a shimmering creature of radiant light, spoke, not through words, but through vibrations that pulsed in the air around Jack's mind. The voice was soothing, yet otherworldly. We are the Gravitons. Welcome to our domain, Jack Hale. Jack blinked, trying to make sense of the phrase. The Gravitons? What is this place? You have opened a door, the voice continued, echoing in Jack's mind, a door to our civilization. We are a species of pure gravitational energy, far beyond the limits of your physical world. Jack's mind raced. This couldn't be real. A species of pure gravitational energy? The idea was so outlandish, so incomprehensible, that it made his head spin. He didn't even know what to say next. This was the kind of thing he'd read about in obscure science fiction forums, but never something he'd ever imagined happening to him. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. His thoughts scrambled for something to hold on to, some way to understand the situation. Okay, he managed to say, trying to remain calm. So you're saying that I'm not in my apartment anymore. I've crossed into another dimension? The figure responded, yes, you have breached the boundary between your world and ours. What you call gravity is a mere fraction of the energy we harness. This is the gravitational realm, a higher dimensional space where we exist. Jack stared, still floating aimlessly in the center of the platform. And you're, what? Some kind of super-intelligent aliens? He could feel his heart pounding in his chest, the weightlessness making his thoughts feel more distant, almost dreamlike. We are not alien, in your sense of the word, the graviton replied. We are a species that transcends physical form. We have evolved beyond the limitations of matter. Our existence is governed by the manipulation of gravitational forces, forces you, in your world, have yet to fully understand. A flood of questions surged through Jack's mind. How was it possible for beings to exist without bodies? What did they mean by manipulating gravity? He had always been a curious person, fascinated by the boundaries of science and technology, but this was beyond anything he could ever have imagined. Then, as if reading his mind, the graviton continued, we have watched your species for some time, Jack. You possess a unique potential. Your mind, your body, it is capable of harnessing gravitational forces in ways that we have never seen. Jack blinked in disbelief. What are you talking about? I'm just a tech geek who likes to mess around with VR systems. You've got the wrong guy. No, Jack. You have opened the door to a new level of understanding. Your brain is capable of perceiving and manipulating gravitational forces. You have the potential to join us, to evolve beyond the physical realm. Jack was stunned. Evolve? You mean, I could become like you? One of you? No more body, no more, what, everything that makes me me. Exactly, the graviton answered. To join us, you must release your attachment to your flesh and embrace the energy that sustains us. Jack felt a strange tug in his chest, a mixture of excitement and terror. They were offering him something that sounded beyond comprehension. He could leave behind his humdrum human life, his outdated body, and step into a higher existence. It was a tempting thought, one that many would have embraced without a second thought, but Jack hesitated. Wait a minute, he said, suddenly filled with doubt. You want me to give up everything? My body? My life? My memories? He gestured to the floating gravitons. How do you even feel anything if you don't have bodies? How do you? The graviton's response was calm, yet it seemed to shimmer with understanding. We do not need bodies to experience existence, Jack. Our consciousness is free, unbound by the limitations of flesh. But we understand your hesitation. It is a difficult concept for your kind to grasp. But if you choose, you can evolve. You can leave your body behind and join us in the purest form of existence. Jack stood there, floating in the vastness of the gravitational realm, his thoughts swirling with the weight of the decision before him. Could he really leave behind everything that made him human? Or was this just another wild idea, another experiment gone wrong, and most importantly, should he trust them? Jack was still floating in the air, his mind whirling, as the weight of the graviton's words pressed against him like a physical force. He could hear his heartbeat in his ears, the rapid pulse of it reminding him just how human he was. His hands trembled slightly as he tried to steady himself, but no matter how much he focused, the feeling of weightlessness persisted. The platform beneath him, if it could even be called that, had no edges or boundaries. It felt like the entire universe stretched out in every direction, an endless expanse of cosmic beauty, the graviton that had been speaking to him, a shimmering being with shifting, pulsating light, floated effortlessly before him. Its form constantly changing, like a ripple across the surface of a pond, the energy around it almost seemed to hum in a low, resonant frequency. It was hard for Jack to even consider what he was seeing as a being, in the conventional sense. The graviton was something else entirely, both more and less than anything Jack had ever encountered. It wasn't humanoid, not in the traditional way. It didn't have legs, arms, or a face. It was energy, light, thought, pure presence. "I don't understand," Jack said, his voice trembling more than he would have liked. He blinked a few times, trying to shake off the sensation of the ground beneath him not existing. "You're saying I can just give up my body? Become like you?" "You would not become like us," the graviton said, its voice resonating not in his ears, but inside his mind, like a vibration that reached deep into his very soul. "You would transcend your human form. No longer bound by the constraints of flesh, you would become energy itself, a being of pure thought and gravity. You would be free to exist without limits, to explore the cosmos, and to learn things that your human mind cannot yet comprehend." Jack shook his head. He tried to push against the overwhelming pull of the idea, but it was like trying to resist the tide. "This sounds insane," he said. "You want me to just, what? Leave my body behind? Never feel the sun on my face again, never hold a conversation with someone, never eat a pizza?" The graviton's presence flickered, as if amused, but it didn't interrupt. "You would not need the sun," it said. "Nor would you need to eat, sleep, or experience pain. You would be free of the mundane, the fragile limitations of your flesh. You could think, create, and explore in ways you cannot imagine." Jack felt his mind begin to spin again. He thought about his family, his mom, his sister, and his friends. Could he really abandon them all? How would they even know what happened to him? What kind of life would it be, living without the physical world around him? "Why me?" Jack blurted, the words coming out before he could stop them. "What makes me so special? I'm just some random guy messing around with VR simulations. You could probably find someone else to do whatever you're offering." He tried to sound more confident than he felt, but the words fell flat in the weightlessness of the gravitational realm. "It is your mind," the graviton said, its tone both reassuring and cryptic. "Your ability to perceive and manipulate gravitational forces, even though you are unaware of it. You have tapped into a power that we have been unable to replicate, even with our advanced technology. You opened the door, Jack. It is not by chance that you were chosen. The potential is in you, whether you realize it or not." Jack didn't know how to respond. There was no logical argument he could make against this. The gravitons were beyond logic. Their very existence was a contradiction. And the more he tried to hold on to what he knew, the more his human limitations seemed insignificant in comparison to their endless possibilities. He felt a sudden tug in his chest, a deep, gnawing sensation. He wanted to understand, wanted to know more, but at the same time, he couldn't quite shake the fear. It was like standing on the edge of a cliff, staring out into an infinite abyss. "I don't get it," Jack said, his voice now small. "You say I could leave everything behind, but what happens after that? I mean, if I become one of you, if I let go of everything, what's left? What's the point?" The graviton didn't answer immediately, but for a moment, Jack could feel a kind of pulse, a shifting in the energy around him, as if the very air was filled with an unspoken answer. It was subtle, but it was there. "The point, Jack, is that you would no longer be bound by the restrictions of human perception. No longer would you see only a fraction of reality. You would know everything, see everything, be everywhere. You would experience the universe in ways that a human mind cannot." Jack felt a shiver run down his spine. As incredible as it sounded, there was something seductive about it, the promise of knowing everything, of becoming more than what he was. But that's when something inside him snapped back. pulling him away from the allure. "I can't," Jack said firmly, though the words felt strange coming out of his mouth. "I can't just give up everything for some vague idea of freedom. I'm human. I'm not whatever you are." The graviton seemed to pause for a moment, and Jack wondered if it was considering his response. For a brief instant, it felt almost personal. But then the entity spoke again, its voice less insistent, but still filled with deep, unyielding wisdom. "You misunderstand, Jack. We are not asking you to become something you are not. We are offering you the opportunity to evolve, to experience a higher existence. You are still you. We are not asking you to forget your memories or your experiences. They will remain, but they will no longer be limited to your human form. You will be able to experience them, revisit them, see them in new ways." Jack tried to process the offer, but he was still stuck on the idea of leaving his human life behind. The more he thought about it, the more absurd it seemed. He loved being human, even with all its flaws and limitations. He loved the physicality of it, the touch of a warm cup of coffee, the feeling of air in his lungs, the smell of fresh cut grass, the thrill of a roller coaster. How could he give that all up? I don't know if I can," Jack said quietly, more to himself than to the graviton. "It is not an easy choice," the graviton said, "but it is a choice nonetheless. A choice that many of us have made. And a choice you will have to make, too, if you wish to progress beyond the boundaries of your world." Jack didn't respond immediately. He was overwhelmed, his mind racing in 1,000 different directions. Part of him wanted to accept, wanted to leave behind his human limitations and explore the infinite universe the graviton spoke of. But the other part, the part that was human, wanted to cling to what he knew, to what was real to him, no matter how messy or imperfect. But then, just as he was about to respond, a new voice interrupted the conversation. This one was different, a softer, more melodic sound, one that Jack had not heard before. "He is afraid," the new voice said, its tone gentle. "But that does not mean he is unworthy. Perhaps we should give him time." Jack looked around, startled. He hadn't noticed the other gravitons, the ones who had been silently watching all this time. One of them was now moving toward him, its form shifting and glowing with a soft, golden hue. "Time to understand," the voice continued, "time to see the beauty in both worlds." Jack stared at the being, his heart still racing. For a moment, he didn't know what to think. He had hoped that his refusal would end the conversation, but now it seemed like there was more at stake than he had imagined. The graviton before him spoke again, and this time, the words were not an offer. They were a promise. "You may not be ready now, Jack Hale. But when the time comes, you will understand. And when that time comes, you will know the choice is yours." The voice faded, and the gravitons drifted back into the vast expanse of the gravitational realm, leaving Jack alone once again with his thoughts. The world around Jack began to settle back into a strange kind of stillness after the gravitons withdrew. He hovered in the vast, color-shifting space, his mind racing as he tried to make sense of the last moments. The offer still echoed in his thoughts, pulling at him like the tide. Become something beyond human. Transcend the limitations of his body. It was the kind of offer people dreamt of in science fiction, but no one ever truly thought they'd face. And now, here he was, stuck between the impossible and the real. He glanced around, looking for some sign, something familiar in this alien landscape, but there was nothing. The platform he was on was now silent, the pulsating energy of the gravitons gone. It was as if he was alone in the vastness of space, a speck of dust in an infinite void. And yet, the more he thought about it, the less alone he felt. The gravitons had said they were watching him, that he had potential. He could almost feel their presence lingering just beyond his perception. "Why me?" Jack whispered to himself. "Why do I get to make this choice? Why do I get to leave everything behind?" He didn't know the answer. The only thing he did know was that the decision was no longer simple. It wasn't just about giving up his body, it was about giving up everything that made him, well, him. His family, his friends, his experiences. They were real. They were tangible. Would they be worth less when he became a being of pure gravity? Would they even matter? But then again, there was something seductive about their offer. The gravitons had shown him a glimpse of something far beyond human comprehension. No more hunger. No more exhaustion. No more sickness. He could think, move, and explore in ways that went beyond the body. There was freedom in that. But there was also something terrifying. Would he still be Jack? Would he still feel the joy of laughter, the rush of adrenaline, the thrill of life? You will understand, the soft, melodic voice had said. When the time comes, you will know the choice is yours. Jack didn't know when that time would come. How could he? The promise sounded so final, so absolute. And what if he chose wrong? What if he gave up his humanity only to regret it? There were so many unknowns. And it wasn't as though the gravitons were asking him to try it out. It wasn't like a job interview where he could just leave if he didn't like it. This was an all-or-nothing decision, a point of no return. Think, Jack, he said aloud, trying to ground himself in something that made sense. What's more important? What's real? What matters? He stood there for a long time, listening to the distant hum of gravitational currents in the air, the faint whispers of energy that seemed to speak to him in ways that felt beyond words. Was it a trap? Was he meant to feel like this, uncertain, conflicted? He didn't know. The thought of returning to his old life, the humdrum, the trivial distractions, the little pleasures, seemed almost laughable now. How could he go back to his apartment, back to his familiar routines, when he'd glimpsed something so much larger than anything his human world had to offer? But then, another thought struck him. The gravitons had told him that his mind could perceive gravitational forces in ways they hadn't seen before. Could this be an accident? Was it his curiosity that had opened the door to this otherworldly realm? Or was he supposed to be here, to witness this inescapable truth that humanity was far too small to understand? He remembered his mother, the way her face always lit up when he called. He remembered his sister's laughter at their last family dinner. He remembered how it felt to hug his best friend after years of not seeing each other, that deep feeling of connection that transcended everything else. Could he give that up? Could he really choose a future where those experiences, those moments, didn't matter? His thoughts began to circle around themselves, spiraling like the energy currents of the gravitational realm. He couldn't ignore it anymore. The choice wasn't about whether or not to join the gravitons. It was about how he chose to view his existence. Could he continue to appreciate his life, even if it was fleeting and limited? Or would he abandon that very essence of being human in exchange for something unfathomable? We do not need bodies to experience existence, the graviton had said. We exist beyond the limitations of flesh. Jack had thought that was an answer, but now it felt more like a question. Was it possible to experience more without the flesh? Could he truly understand life from a higher perspective, or would it only make him distant from the things that made him feel alive? Was his humanity a hindrance, or was it the very thing that made him special? The very thing that made him Jack Hale? I can't, Jack said, his voice cracking in the stillness. His breath came faster now, like a tightness in his chest. I can't just give that up. I can't be nothing but energy. The words felt strange coming from him. It was as if saying them out loud would make the universe somehow more real. And yet, the gravitons were right about one thing: this was his choice. And only he could make it that I in the silence of the vast dimension. Jack let out a long, slow breath. No, he whispered. I won't give it up. I'll keep being human. I'll keep everything. For a moment, nothing changed. The gravitational realm remained as vast and unknowable as it had always been. But Jack felt a weight lift from his chest. It wasn't an escape, it wasn't a retreat. It was a decision. He would embrace the limitations of his physical self, and in doing so, he would find his true freedom. Then, without warning, the gravitons began to reappear. Their shimmering forms materialized before him once again, filling the space with their glowing, pulsating energy. The soft melodic voice spoke again, this time with a note of something almost like approval. "You have made your choice, Jack Hale," it said. "You have chosen to remain human, to live as you are, to embrace the limitations of your form." Jack looked around, meeting their unblinking, radiant presence with a mixture of relief and confusion. "I didn't choose because it's easy. I chose because it's me. I have to be me. That's what matters." There was a long silence, the kind that stretched out beyond time, like the pause before the first note of a symphony. And then, in a voice that was neither cold nor harsh, but deeply knowing, the graviton replied, "Then you have made the right choice." The air shimmered, and for a brief moment, Jack felt a presence, a soft warmth surrounding him, a gentle pull toward something greater. But it was fleeting, like the touch of sunlight through a cloud. The gravitons were gone, and he was alone again in the infinite, shifting expanse of the gravitational realm, but he wasn't afraid anymore. Jack slowly floated back down to the platform beneath him, his feet finally connecting with solid ground. The floor felt strange beneath him, but somehow more real than it ever had before. He took a deep breath, and for the first time since he'd entered this strange dimension, he felt the weight of his own existence. The weight of his body. His fingers tingled, his legs felt solid beneath him, and in that moment, everything felt possible. That it wasn't the freedom of the gravitons. It wasn't the transcendent existence they had offered. But it was enough. It was his. And that, Jack realized, was all that mattered. The decision had been made. And whatever came next, he was ready for it.